If your vehicle has a center cap, take the center cap off. Just use a pry bar and get behind here. Slide it off. Take the lug nuts off. Use a 22mm socket. Now remove the wheel. Take these two caliper bolts out, right here and here. Use a T45 socket. Take those bolts out. Take a straight blade screwdriver, just compress the caliper a little bit. Just pry in between the brake rotor and the caliper. And then you can pry the caliper up like this and out. If you're doing the opposite side, it's probably going to be the opposite. You pry from the top and out. And then use a brake hanger and attach it to the coil spring. Just make sure there's no tension on the brake hose. Take the brake pads off, just slide them out. There we go. Take these two bolts out for the brake caliper bracket. Use a 21mm socket. And slide the bracket off. Got to take this cap off. Just use a pry bar or a screwdriver. Just kind of give it a tap with a hammer. Slide that off. Take the cotter pin off. Just use some side cutters and fold it over. And slide it up. Pull it out. Take off this little cap. You can use a wrench, a 1 1/16 wrench, or a socket, either way. Loosen up this nut. Once you get it loose, you can do it by hand. Make sure you hold the rotor so it doesn't just fall off. Take the nut off and just pull it out a little bit, and there's the bearing. There's going to be a washer on the other side, so set that aside. Then take the nut, put the nut back on. Just a couple threads. You don't have to do too much. And then grab the rotor, just slide it. We're going to pull forcefully as we slide it down. And there's the other bearing. It's from the inside and the seal. You can take this off and take the nut off. Just going to clean the rotor first. Take a little brake parts cleaner on a rag. Just wipe it down. Flip the rotor over. Do the same on the other side. And just grease this up a little bit. That's pretty good. You don't have to put too much. Just get a nice thin coat. You want to take the old bearing, or if you're replacing the bearings, just clean off the grease. You can wipe it off. You don't have to put this in a brake parts cleaner or anything. Just wipe off some of the old grease. And you can use a tool, or you can do it with your hand. Just take some grease in the palm of your hand, just like this. You're going to take the bearing and just push the grease into the bearing. You just basically are wiping the grease. And eventually, as you do this, you're going to see the grease start coming out of there. That's when you know that side is packed. And then just move the bearing and do the same thing all the way around. And it's all packed full of grease. Now slide that in position. Just spread it around a little bit. That's good. Take your new seal and just slide it in position. And you can use a seal installer. If you don't have a seal installer, sometimes just a piece of wood, block of wood works well. And just hammer it into place. If there's any grease, just wipe away the excess. Before we install the rotor, we're going to pack the front bearing as well. Do it the same way you did it for the back one. Now let's clean up the caliper. Just take a straight blade screwdriver, take off the caliper slide bracket, and just clean this up with a wire brush. And wipe it down. If you want, spray it down with some brake parts cleaner. Take some brake caliper grease, do a nice thin coat. And take the bracket and it's going to slide in position like that. They are different, so check with the one that came off. And then you're going to do the same with the other side. After that's on, just put a little thin coat of grease right here where the pads are going to go. Take the rotor. You can clean this spindle up a little bit if you want. Just wipe off some of the dirty grease. Slide the rotor on. Take the front bearing, slide it in position. Take the washer, slide the washer on, and the nut. Get the nut started. You want to spin this, and we're going to tighten this nut down as we're spinning it to 30 foot-pounds. That's just going to seat the bearing. Now we're going to loosen this 2 turns. Now we're going to torque this again while we're spinning it to 21 foot-pounds. Then loosen it again, 175 degrees. And the last time, just spin it and torque this to 18 inch-pounds. Make sure on inch-pounds. Very light. That's good. Now install the nut retainer and line it up so that you can see the hole and put a new cotter pin in. If it doesn't line up, you should be able to take the nut retainer off and just move it a little bit. Then take some side cutters and bend the cotter pin. And trim the excess. Put the cap back on, just line it up. If the cap's pretty badly mangled, you might want to get a new one. Just give it a tap. Looks good. If you got grease on the rotor, just spray some brake parts cleaner down and just wipe it off. And slide the bracket back over the rotor. Take the bolts. You can put some thread lock adhesive on the bolts. Get that one started. And get the other one started. Now torque these bolts to 166 foot-pounds. Make sure you don't get any grease on the surface of the brake pads, and line them up. Get that installed, and put those on the inside as well. Now take the brake caliper off the hanger. You want to compress the pistons. You can use one of the old brake pads. Use a brake caliper compressor tool. And just nice and slow, compress the pistons. As you're doing this, the fluid's going through the hoses, through the lines, back up into the master reservoir cylinder. Nice and slow. All right, and when it's completely compressed, take the tool off, take the brake pad out. Now we can clean these caliper slide pins. Just slide these out. Take a screwdriver from the back side to get that out. Just take a little brake parts cleaner, clean it off. If it was corroded, you want to clean the hole out as well. Take a little brake caliper grease, you could slide it through there and a little bit on the pin. Slide the pin back in. Push it in, make sure it seals on both sides. Wipe off the excess grease and do the same for the other side. Now take the caliper, make sure the hose isn't twisted, slide it over the brake pads, and this on this side the top is going to go in. It's going to slide down. Install the bolts. Get them both started. Now torque those bolts to 23 foot-pounds. Put the tire back on. Line it up. Put the lug nuts on. Now torque these lug nuts to 148 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Now go around again, double check. Put the center cap back on. Good.